Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar event, Supercharge Your Data Applications with Generative AI. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day and spending it with us. My name is Mary Grace Glascott. I'm an OPM on the data analytics team at Google Cloud, and I'm joined with my colleague, Jessie, who's going to show you some pretty awesome stuff in a little bit. The agenda for today. So I'll give a quick intro. Why are we talking about this today? Why are we talking about Gen AI? It's not like no one is talking about this. We'll talk about specifically Gen AI in Looker. Looker is an amazing data application. It has all of the ingredients to really activate Gen AI in a trusted and compelling way. Jesse will talk about that. He'll give a quick demonstration, and then we're here for your Q&A. So please, throughout the session, ask any questions that you have, and we'll take as many as we can at the end. All right. So, obviously we want to talk about data applications today. We want to talk about generative AI today. But even just taking a step back for a second, I think we can all recognize that, a lot of us have made some pretty incredible investments in data and AI. We know the huge potential it has for our organizations. We've invested in people, we've invested in programs, we've invested in technology. We're hiring chief data officers, chief AI officers. But, despite a lot of this investment, the data shows it's still really hard to make data and AI work in practice. In fact, per a recent Accenture study, only 68% of companies 68% of companies are unable to realize the measurable value of data. The exciting thing is that we are at an inflection point right now, and I think we can all feel it. Large models are innovating industries of all kind. They're delivering new business value at a pretty accelerated pace. And that's because traditionally, we need a ton of resources to extract and manage complex and massive data sets. And now instead, LLMs have processed the world's publicly available data, and it has made it so much more accessible to us. So not only processing all types of formats, be that text, audio, images, and synthesizing that into, really easy to use interfaces, but anyone can use these experiences. From a Google standpoint, this is really exciting for us because this has been an area that we've had a lot of experience around. And so, we've been innovating for decades on some of the world's most used products powered by AI, search, Gmail, YouTube, Android, and a lot of the core technology that underpins generative AI comes from Google, and when we introduced the transformer technology back in 2017. So we have more open source AI than any other company in the world. We've got 2,500 researchers, lots and lots of publications on this. Gen AI is really part of our DNA. And the reason why we believe we're uniquely positioned to help solve a lot of the data problems that you're experiencing and reach your users and your customers in a more intuitive way is because we live it every day. So in terms of Google Cloud in particular, I think it's pretty clear that in order to have an AI strategy, you really need to have a data strategy first. And for us, that means having an AI-ready data platform that really would provide you all of the data capabilities that your organization will need out of the box. You really want to make sure you're investing in a platform that's built on open standards, preventing you from lock-in, a platform that has the ability to enable all of your users at scale. And you want to be able to leverage AI capabilities and functions like LLMs, embeddings, vector databases, and more. And these capabilities should really be built into your data platform. When it comes to generative AI particularly, You don't want to be moving your data from various sources to your ML models. You want to be able to bring Gen AI to your data. And that will really enable principles and practices that are needed for teams to be able to achieve cost-efficient, scalable, governed, and secure AI. Today, obviously, the focus is on Looker specifically, and when we're talking about building data applications. But the beauty of Looker is that it was built from day one with that direct query architecture, which means that it can take advantage of all of the goodness within whatever data warehouse that you use. Many of our customers love BigQuery in particular, and a key reason is BigQuery ML. And the fact that it offers a simple SQL interface to complete some pretty complex machine learning tasks using world-class models to do both traditional and predictive ML, such as forecasting and anomaly detection. But of course, in this era of generative AI, bringing in that exciting functionality as well. And so using BQML to tap into the power of Vertex AI in the same place as where your data is. The other beauty of Looker, of course, is that it doesn't need to be BigQuery. Looker speaks the language of any modern data warehouse. And it doesn't need to be Vertex. If you have other LLM endpoints that you want to connect to, that's fine. That's that open architecture that we were talking about earlier. But today, we will focus primarily on Looker and the Vertex AI integration that we've built. And that's because we're heavily investing in this area. So you may have heard the week before last, we made some pretty major announcements related to bringing AI directly to your data using first-party model integration with BigQuery and Vertex AI. In particular, support for Gemini 1.0 Pro and BQ. So really exciting announcement, allowing you to leverage the new multimodal Gen AI capabilities for extracting insights from all types of unstructured data, video, audio, text, and image. So what about the BI side of the house? Well, I'm probably a little bit biased, but the BI layer is really where I think Gen AI shines the most. And that's because it's where us, the masses, see and interact with data. And generative AI experiences are making it easier than ever to engage with our data. And so you could be a more technical user that is looking to enhance productivity and using LLMs to be able to automate code completion, write new models, for example. Or you may be on the other end of the spectrum, right? A business user who has found it difficult in the past to get started with BI, to get started with data analysis and visualization, being able to automate a report from scratch, being able to converse with your dashboard as you would an analyst on your team. And for the topic of today, data applications, it's really such an exciting moment for us to be able to build data applications that have that natural language interface to be able to reach a new market of users who historically may not have had the expertise to be able to utilize data and analytics. Underpinning this vision are some pretty essential components that we believe are pretty necessary when we're talking about generative AI. And that for us is particularly our universal semantic layer to enable consistent interpretations of that data and to reduce hallucinations. And Jesse will talk about that a little bit more in a bit. Before I hand it over to Jesse, I just wanted to clarify, there's really kind of two primary ways to incorporate generative AI into Looker. So on the right, we have something that we call Gemini agents. So you probably heard us announce the term Duet AI at last year's Next conference. Duet AI has been rebranded as Gemini. Our latest multimodal LLM has the same name. But these Gemini agents refer to the Gen AI assistant capabilities that come out of the box across Google products. So a lot of you may be already using Gemini agents in Workspace, for example, to create content in your Google Docs or your Google Slides. In Looker, the Gemini AI agents refer to creating visualizations from scratch, creating LookML models, creating code, that type of experience. Many of these are currently in experimental preview. But today, what we're going to be primarily focusing on is what's here on the left. And these are Vertex AI extensions for Looker. So these are open source kits that enable you to build custom Gen AI experiences for your data applications. And these are available today. We have customers working with these now. And that is what is super exciting for us, to get that real first-party feedback from our customers who are actively integrating Gen AI into their data applications and experiences. And this is where I will hand it over to Jesse to give us more information in this area. Jesse.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary Grace. So my name is Jesse Sherb. I am an AI and data product specialist at Google Cloud, and I am super excited to walk you through some of the Gen AI capabilities that we've brought to Looker. And I will reiterate what Mary Grace just said. Everything that I'm going to walk you through today is going to cover, is going to leverage Looker's existing capabilities. So it's a set of open sourced extensions and tools that customers can start to use on any Looker instance. So we can almost think of this as complementary to the amazing product roadmap and all of the AI agents that are going to be coming later this year as part of the Looker suite of products. All right, let's dive in. So at the beginning of the year, my team was asked, how do we think generative AI will have an impact on analytics? And we really boiled it into these three main areas. And I think starting on the left, probably the lowest hanging fruit is expanded reach. And so Looker has always been designed to democratize access to governed data across an organization. But now, as we start to layer on generative AI, large language models, the ability to ask questions of our data through plain English, that is only going to increase the number of users at an organization who have access to data, but more importantly, feel comfortable working with their data and asking questions of their data. The next layer of this is storytelling. And specifically, we're talking about, moving away from a world of static dashboards and reports where you have to kind of manually sift through data tables and charts to derive any insight, into a more spoon-fed approach where we can leverage generative AI to provide us with, in-depth, concise summaries of what might be going on a dashboard or report, or prescribing, actionable next steps, so that users can easily digest, what they should be taking away from a particular dashboard. And the last piece is impact. And I think we're probably going to see more of this in the next 6 to 12 months. But large language models are going to allow us to build automation more rapidly and more efficiently than ever before. And so as we start to talk about real business impact that is downstream of the BI and analytics layer, again, I think we're going to start to see a lot of use cases more, later this year that will have that type of downstream effect on the business. So as we've started to talk with customers, we've seen a bunch of use cases around generative AI as it pertains to analytics. And I think it kind of boils down to these four main categories. And again, as we start on the left here, I think these are some of the more familiar use cases for generative AI. The first tier being create. So letting large language models do what they do best, which is anything generative. It's right in the name. But in this case, right, think about use cases like generating copy for a marketing campaign, or generating email copy, or product descriptions, or generating a visualization from a natural language prompt. The second, maybe the most popular request in terms of use cases that we get is on the summarization side. So similar to what I just mentioned on the last slide, but how can we, break down complex large data sets into these concise, actionable summaries to make our data more digestible for our users. But then these latter two, discover and automate, again, I think this is where we're going to start to see an even bigger impact that generative AI can have in terms of analytics on the business. When we talk about discover, we're specifically talking about any form of data enrichment or data augmentation we're trying to do. So, often customers will come to us with a use case that we have all of these records in our CRM, but they're not up to date, or we're missing information. We need headquartered address, LinkedIn page, company size, etc. And we can use large language models, and in particular, Google and Gemini are well positioned to deliver on these use cases, to go and actually retrieve information from publicly available data sources and enrich our data set, fill in those incomplete records so that we can go and push that and update our CRM. And then lastly, on the automation side, historically, if customers wanted to do things like forecasting or anomaly detection or converting unstructured data into structured data or sentiment analysis or text translation, all of these things would require some type of homegrown, bespoke AI ML model they'd have to develop or go and pay a vendor who's already doing that. And now we can start to supplement these large language models in Gemini to start to facilitate these processes and allow us to build these type of automations much, much quicker and much more efficiently. So we believe that generative AI is going to accelerate Looker's impact on data-driven decision-making. And when customers ask me the why Looker piece of this, where does Looker come into play in terms of building these type of experiences, I typically will use the example of conversational BI, which I think is kind of the hot topic right now. And what we'll discuss is between when a user asks a question and from when we surface a response back to the user, there is a lot that needs to happen and a lot that needs to go right in order for that response to be contextually relevant to what the user is asking, right? So does it actually pertain to the question, or is it a hallucination? And B, if there's any metrics or KPIs that are included in here, are they calculated accurately and consistently across users that are asking the same or similar questions? And feedback we've gotten from customers who are trying to build these experiences directly on top of a data warehouse is they are realizing just how much engineering effort and time goes into fine-tuning a large language model to be able to do this efficiently. And to even get to kind of a baseline minimal viable product has been quite exhaustive. And so instead, how can we use Looker to leverage what Looker has always been designed to do and what Looker does best to really kind of facilitate this process? And so let's go through it step by step. When a user asks a question, the first thing that we're going to do on the Looker side is authenticate that user. So who is that user and what are they permissioned to see? And so any response that we surface back to them is going to only include data points and information that they have access to. And so you don't have to think about rebuilding your entire data access control process from scratch. You can simply leverage what you already have in Looker, or you can easily build within Looker. And the next piece is we are asking a large language model to just translate the user question into the relevant fields and metrics, dimensions, measures that are going to be needed to answer that question. And we do that by providing it with Looker's semantic data model. And so this contains all the contextual clues and metadata about our data sources that's going to better inform the large language model, what are going to be those relevant fields needed. And this process is, again, leaning on the strength of an LLM in terms of what it does really well. From there, we're going to actually have Looker take the relevant fields, build a data set, build a visualization, and most importantly, Looker is going to be the one who writes the SQL required to retrieve the information and calculate the fields we need to surface a response. And again, feedback we've gotten from customers who are trying to build kind of a natural language to SQL solution, what they're telling us is like, forget complex SQL statements. We're having a hard enough time getting it to write simple SQL statements that are both accurate and again, consistent across user. And we're going to see all of this in just a moment in the demo. So last couple things from an architectural standpoint. So anybody who's familiar with a Looker architecture, this is no different here. Looker is this middle layer that sits on top of your raw data sources. And those data sources could be data warehouses that exist in a GCP environment, another cloud environment on-prem. Looker is database agnostic. And the first thing, in the lens of a large language model that we're going to provide is that semantic data model. So providing that semantic knowledge of your data sources to better inform the large language model. The next thing is an open API layer. And that makes it easy to communicate with services like Vertex, which are API based, but also B, allows us to take any of the experiences that we're going to walk through today and build our own front end applications of that. And so that could cover everything we see up top in terms of conversational BI experiences, augmented or summarized analytics, some of that automation we've talked about. And then anybody who's looking to build your own application, your own data product, a custom AI assistant or chatbot, leveraging Looker to power those as well, where again, you're probably going to be doing a more custom, front end for that. And then lastly, of course, the data access control, which we mentioned. So in terms of how Vertex fits into this, from a UI perspective, we're kind of wrapping Vertex into your Looker experience, but on the back end, we're just making simple API calls to Vertex to hit the Gemini, the large language model in this case. All right. So one last slide. I'm really going to kind of just use this to tee up the demo here. But as we were thinking about how we're going to start to integrate, these generative AI tools into the BI experience, we wanted to make sure that we were, keeping Looker's goal in mind of a focus on actionability. And so we didn't want to just stop where we see so many solutions stop, which is just on this, concept of natural language, ask a question. And so, whereas many solutions stop there, or maybe even on the consume side, we want to make sure we are pulling this through so that we can really enable users to not just ask questions, but to actually have those drive decision making. And so those, all of the data enrichment that we've talked about, and then integrating with other downstream applications so we can actually go and trigger these tasks and workflows beyond the analytics layer. All right. So I am going to hop into the demo. And the first thing we're going to cover is that first step of prompt. And so this is kind of that conversational experience where we have this tool that we call the Explore Assistant. Again, this is one of our open sourced extensions. It's deployed through the extension framework. And from here, we can take a question. For example, I'm going to go ahead and ask it, who are our most loyal customers for this e-commerce company? Consider these different parameters, include these different fields. And what we're doing behind the scenes here is we are actually feeding Gemini, in this case, our entire data model. And we are just asking Gemini to dissect the question that the user asked into the relevant fields that are going to be necessary to answer that question. And so Looker then populates what we call this Explore environment. You'll see we get a nice little map visualization. It adds our filter for 18 months. But more importantly, it gives us this really robust data set and contextually accurate data set. So it has things like lifetime revenue, lifetime orders, 30-day repeat purchase rate. Certainly a lot of information that would be great for understanding our loyal customer base. And so the reason that it was able to get this so contextually accurate is because behind the scenes, if we look at something like our 30-day repeat purchase rate, we have the ability to append these contextual clues. So we can use tags, labels, descriptions, where we can add in things like buying propensity for our more complex metrics that we would like, the LLM to pick up on for certain questions. But you should also know that LLMs, large language models, do a really good baseline job of performing this task. So if we go and look at something like our lifetime revenue, we actually had no additional metadata there, yet it was still able to properly break down, the word loyal into these fields. And so, a lot of other solutions we see, they kind of require you ask these very robotic questions like provide me a list of users ranked descending by lifetime revenue. And we know that's just not how your users are going to want to converse with these experiences. They're going to want to ask these questions in plain English, like we can see here. And so just to really double down on what we're doing here, right? We are taking the question and we're asking a large language model to just populate and explore URL in Looker, which is the experience we just saw. So can we take this question and break that down into the fields, the filters, the limits that we would need, and the visual configuration? And with minimal input, we can ask Gemini to produce this, which is then going to construct the Explorer that we're seeing here that has the data set along with the visualization. Okay, so the next piece of this beyond prompting is the consumption side of it. So as we talk about like augmented BI or augmented analytics, the next phase of this will be like, okay, well, what if we already have a dashboard and we want to do a good job of summarizing that? So give me 1 second here. I'm going to switch over to a dashboard. I'm going to introduce the second extension that we have, the second tool we have, which is our dashboard summarization tool. And here at a click of a button, we are going to pass through the each tile on this dashboard through to Gemini, and we're going to have it output a description of the tile as well as a summary. And what's pretty cool is you can actually see that it's going to surface the 5.5 million that we see at surface level on the dashboard, but it also is able to go a little bit deeper than that and provide us additional context we wouldn't otherwise see by just looking at the dashboard, like month-over-month sales or trends, etc. It will also provide us with prescriptive next steps to make this data more actionable. And for some of these queries, you might have surface level next steps, but for the more complex queries, you will get more robust, more complex next steps that are prescribed here by the LLM. And so often we have customers who say, we build these amazing dashboards in Looker, but at the end of the day, our users a lot of times go into a dashboard. They don't know the intent of the developer. They don't know what they should be inferring or taking away from a dashboard. And this is a really good way where the dashboard developer or creator can essentially download that intent into little descriptions that we can append here. And we can use those descriptions to better inform the large language model of the types of summaries and next steps we might be looking for. Additionally, everything we design in Looker is always geared to being extensible. And so we have the ability to push this to downstream applications like Hangouts and Slack. And so if I click that Slack button and I click allow, it will then push that information to Slack. So we can actually see a nice formatted version of this. And the goal here is really to bring this information to the tools that we know folks are most likely to consume information or spending most of their time. And this can be done on schedule. We have had customers who have expanded this and they've actually built their own Looker bot where they can call these experiences directly within the Slack UI and not even have to use the Looker UI. But again, just a way of kind of integrating this into other tools that folks are using on a day-to-day basis. So now I want to make sure that we're covering those latter stages I talked about, enrich and execute. And so let's go through an example now. I saw one of the recommendations on that dashboard was let's launch a loyalty campaign or a promotional or nurture campaign to see if we can drive up lifetime value of our customers. And so what not a better cohort of users to do that against than our loyal customer list that we've created. So from here, the next tool we've built is what we call our Vertex AI data action. And this is really just a simple API call that we can make from Looker to Vertex, where we can send any of our data from Looker along with a user prompt and some prompt engineering we're doing in the backend through to Vertex. And so in this case, when this loads in just a second, we are going to ask if we can write personalized email copy for each and every one of these users. We're going to offer them a discount code, and we want this call or this task to be iterated per row, per customer. And we can send that off, and our output is going to look something like this, where now we have our list of customers, and you'll see we have now personalized email copy for each and every one of them. This one is talking about a California-inspired collection for this California resident. And again, before generative AI, this just simply wasn't possible, right? We could create these kind of basic templated emails or custom write personalized copy. But now this becomes something where we can easily do this at a touch of a button, and really enrich our data set even further. And of course, to drive that home, if we pop back over here for a second, just like anything else in Looker, going back to this screen for a second, you can add any downstream destination you want this data to go. So you might want to, go and create an audience in Facebook, or and run a Google Ads campaign against this audience. You might want to send this to Marketo or HubSpot or an email deployment service where you can actually go and execute the nurture campaign against this customer list that we have. And so just, continue to think not just about the, like, how do we retrieve and consume information with generative AI, but how do we continue to enrich our data and then really go and trigger these downstream tasks and workflows that are going to have the biggest impact on the business. All right. A couple of last things I want to touch on. The first is, and I will actually go and preview one of those AI agents that Mary Grace had said. So this particular tool is not one of the open source tools, but will be coming later this year. But a lot of folks ask me, like, how much do we need to add all of this additional context and metadata into the data model? And the answer is, the more you add, the better the experience will be. As we saw with that loyal to lifetime orders, at a baseline off the shelf, you're going to get a pretty good experience. But of course, as we saw with buying propensity, the more you add, the better the experience and the more accurate the output, or the more complex the questions the users will be able to ask. And so this is going to be an amazing tool, just first and foremost for LookML developers to develop quicker, more efficiently, debug quicker. But I think in the context of enriching our data model for LLM purposes, it also is a perfect way to say, hey, we want to create a new measure, and then ask the large language model to do the tagging or include the keywords that might better inform the large language model as it scans through that data model. And so just another way and another tool and another incorporation of how large language models are going to help us rapidly build and improve upon these different generative AI experiences. All right, lastly, we've talked quite a bit about, the extensibility of Looker. And I think that is most seen in being able to take any of the tools that we've seen today and embed those in some type of custom application, right? So here we have an example application for our mobile coffee company. They have coffee trucks that are deployed around London and some other cities. And in this application, we've weaved in generative AI capabilities throughout. But what I want to focus on is the ability to incorporate the tool set that we just saw directly in here. So through an iframe, we can easily embed the summarization tool that we saw. You'll see we have a new look and feel to our Explorer Assistant here. So the idea here is, yes, quick time to value. You can embed these directly as is into your tools, but the API endpoints that power these tools are also available to you to build complete custom front end on top of them. So in this case, if we want to ask a net new question of the dashboard, like what are our top 10 locations, we can do that, and then it will surface the result back to us in the iframe here in the middle. And then, of course, the extreme example of this would be if you want a completely custom front end where your users may not even know there is Looker powering the experience at all. And so here we have an example of a smart home application, and we can ask questions of our AI assistant here. Show me, who's rang my doorbell today, for example, and it's going to populate that list. And again, these type of experiences are still harnessing all of the power and all of the benefits we talked about using Looker as the backend to facilitate them, but allows you the flexibility to build your own, custom bespoke front end experiences on top of it. All right, that is everything I had to show you from a demo perspective today. I believe we now have some Q&A that we'll cover.
All right, that was so great. Thank you so much, Jesse. A lot to see, a lot to digest. And we've got some really good questions coming in. Before we dive into the questions, just want to provide some resources for you all. So obviously the Looker community is probably where a lot of you found this event. Join it if you're not part of it. Ask your questions there. A lot of the information that Jesse shared is available there. He wrote a blog that's posted in the community. We also want to hear your feedback. So please see the second link here to share your feedback, share questions. If you have ideas for future sessions, we would love to hear. We're going to be having more regular Looker sessions throughout the year. And then, of course, speaking about sessions and content, Google Cloud Next is upon us. So in 3 weeks, I will certainly be in Las Vegas to meet you and hear what you're doing with generative AI, hear your questions. We have a ton of Looker content on the agenda, including a workshop on the topic that we have today, which is really exciting. All right, we have some questions up ahead that were pre-submitted, so let's go to those first, and then we'll cover the questions that are starting to stream in now. All right, so Jesse, does any of the Duet AI, so now we know that Duet AI is now called Gemini, or Gen AI offerings apply to embedding Looker into external sites as iframes? Is this for Looker instances or Cloud Core? So I think that refers to Looker Original or Looker Google Cloud Core, and any Looker Studio support. Can you answer as much as you can on that one?
Sure. Yeah. So I think like we just saw at the tail end of the demo, the answer is yes. So you can embed these experiences through an iframe into any external site or application that you're building, as well as use the API for, again, those more kind of customized experiences. The tooling that we just covered in the demo today are available on any type of Looker instance, Looker Core, Looker Standard. And then in terms of Looker Studio support, so that's going to be where we see a lot of those AI agents coming later this year, is going to be on the Looker Studio side.
Great. Thanks so much. How is this actually implemented? Is the Looker extension framework needed for a lot of the use cases that you showed today?
Yes. So the Looker extension framework is essentially the front end where we are hitting these experiences. So we saw in the Explorer Assistant, that's the little mini web app within Looker where we're asking questions. Similarly to the dashboard summarization tool, those would all be deployed through the extension framework. But again, not a requirement if you are embedding this in a different application.
Okay, great. And let me hop into the questions that are just streaming through now. So there's just kind of piggybacking off of that question, and I can take this. There's a lot of questions on where can I find information? Where's the documentation? So if you looking at the event right now on the YouTube description, there's links regarding the documentation that covers the use cases that Jesse showed today. So please go ahead and check out that documentation within the YouTube description link. Okay. A similar question as the first one, but I just want to make sure it's clear, and I can take this one to start. We have users using both Looker and Looker Studio. Will we see similar capabilities also in Looker Studio? So great question. So when we talked about, at the beginning of the session, there are, your Gemini agents, and those are your more out of the box experiences that don't require any upfront configuration. A lot of those will be coming to Studio. We'll talk a lot more about those at Google Cloud Next. Then there's what Jesse showed. Those are the more open source, customizable experiences where you are configuring the Vertex API to build, as he showed, an Explorer Assistant, for example, within Looker. That can happen within Looker Google Cloud Core. That can happen within Looker Original, and those are available today. There are some Gemini agents that will be specific to Looker Google Cloud Core. Jesse spoke about one of them, which is the LookML assistant. So being able, obviously that's going to be in Looker, and not in Looker Studio, because Looker is where developers create LookML models. So largely the Gemini assistants, the more out-of-the-box experiences will be coming to Studio. And largely what Jesse showed today is specific to Looker Google Cloud Core. And that's because Looker is really more of that data platform for building data experiences, as well as Looker Original. So hopefully that's clear. Okay. Let's see here. Just trying to cover what we did not cover yet. So Jesse, I know you covered this a little bit, but can you talk a little bit more? There's a question that says, how does a semantic layer look like in this use case? And you did cover it, but I do think it's an important question just to make sure it's clear, because that is a pretty critical component when we're talking about generative AI and building data experiences. So can you just talk a little bit more about how the Looker semantic layer interplays with the Vertex AI integration that you showed?
Sure. Yeah. So LookML, which is our semantic data model, can be thought of as a markup language that sits directly on top of SQL. And so really what it is providing metadata about and descriptions and calculations about our different dimensions and measures that exist in the data warehouse. And as a result, we are providing Looker with this instruction manual on how to go write SQL on behalf of users as they historically point and click and ask questions of the tool, of their data rather. And now asking those questions through natural language. And one thing I didn't show, but is worth noting, right? We talked about Looker being the one to generate that SQL. And so Looker as a tool has always been designed to take that semantic data model and convert it into SQL, no matter how complex that SQL might be to return the information. And so we're still leveraging Looker in this case to do all of that hard work on the SQL generation side, so that we can service the response back to the user. And what we're asking the large language model is to simply just go through that semantic data model, look at all of the metadata that we've added, the descriptions and tags and labels and such, and just pluck out the right fields that are going to be needed and relevant to the question.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. All right, I can take this next one. I still don't understand the difference between Vertex and Gemini. Can you clarify? Yes, we hear you, but there's a lot of terminology being thrown out. So think of Vertex as the data platform for GCP, right? That's where you can train models. That's where you can build models. That's where you can access Gemini, which is our latest large language model. But there's also a model garden, so you can access a bunch of different models if you want: large models, small models, open source models from other vendors. So that's Vertex AI. Think about it as our AI workbench of sorts. Gemini, it has kind of two terminologies. One is the large language model, our latest multimodal model from Google, and the other refers to the agents. So those more kind of out-of-the-box experiences that are incorporated throughout Google Workspace, BigQuery, and Looker. So hopefully that clarifies the difference between the two. Jesse, I know we probably can't go into like specifics of price, but can you provide just generally, how is a user supposed to think about calculating costs of using Gemini AI via Looker?
Yeah, so the first piece is to incorporate the tooling, the extensions that we've seen today. There's no additional cost on the Looker licensing side. So if you feel comfortable working with the extension framework, again, all of this is open source and you can deploy this totally on your own. For those who are not comfortable with that, we also have partners and internal service options, to deploy that for you. So that's the first piece. The second piece is on the consumption side. So a lot of questions around, well, how much Vertex consumption is this going to drive? So we've done some estimates, and the answer is relatively low. And the reason being is because, again, we have really kind of significantly reduced the scope of what we're asking from Gemini. We're just feeding it a text file in terms of a data model with the user prompt, and we're just asking it for that URL output that I showed you. And so we're not sending it tens of thousands of rows of data from, tables that are sitting in a data warehouse. We're not asking it to write this real complex SQL or Python. And so, again, because we've kind of reduced that scope, we haven't seen it driving that much consumption on the back end.
Okay, super helpful. Okay, question on timing. When will this all be available? Yeah, I think the good thing is pretty much everything Jesse showed is available today. And that's via the open source kits with the Vertex AI integration. The Gemini agents that I spoke of, so the more out of the box applications, those are the LookML assistant, the Viz assistant. Those are the two that are specific to Looker Google Cloud Core. And then there's a few that are specific to Looker Studio. And so those would be automatic slides generation. Those would be automatic report creation. Those would be natural language Q&A. Those would be automated calculated fields. Those are all of those Gemini assistants are currently in experimental preview. And so for those last four that I mentioned, if you have Looker Studio Pro, you can request access to that experimental preview and begin playing with those. All right. In terms of documentation, a popular topic, Jesse, are there any demos available on GitHub?
On GitHub, no. We do have a publicly available link for a demo, and maybe we can add that to that description afterwards. But then we do have on GitHub the source code repositories for all of the tools that we walk through today with, technical documentation on how to deploy it.
Okay, great. Yep. So GitHub for more of the technical documentation, and we'll follow up with the demo that Jesse spoke of and put it in the link to this YouTube event. So please check back for that. Okay, in terms of analytics behind the scenes, firing up the content, one of the questions is, can the tool look forward? So for example, if a user writes, based on the prior 2 years results, what's likely to be my best selling category over the next 3 months? So more kind of forecasting, predictive analytics type capabilities.
So yes, I will say that might take a bit more tailoring in terms of examples that we provide the model to get it to understand that it's now going to be doing forecasting. For very basic forecasting, like the question just described, certainly, I think a pretty low lift to tweak this to be able to do that. For your more complex forecasting models you're trying to create, right? If you're asking to do like time series forecasting over the next 12 months or something like that, large language models can certainly be used to do that, but I would say in a different context here than necessarily the tooling that we went through.
Okay, great. And it looks like we have a final question in. So this is regarding kind of the mechanics around the query. So Gemini to query Looker using natural text. Is Gemini generating a SQL query or a LookML view to generate the response in Looker?
Yeah, so if I'm able to just quickly pop back up the screen here. So really what we're asking Looker to do, what we're asking Gemini to do in this case is take the question and really just map it to these different buckets, which make up an explore URL. So the fields that we're going to need, the filters we're going to need, the visualization configuration. So here's our inputs, and Gemini is really just outputting literally text with the fields, filters, etc., that are going to make up the explore URL, which is the combination of our visualization and our data set. The SQL that's generated behind the scenes here was all generated by Looker. So even if you're watching this and you don't write SQL, I can tell you this would not be fun to write for a person or for a large language model. And so leveraging Looker to do this, which again, it's always been designed to do, is going to make sure that we can, have these complex SQL statements that are going to be accurately written to populate the data set that we needed. So again, just to confirm there, Looker is writing the SQL, not Gemini in this case. Gemini is simply just populating the URL that includes all of this information.
Super helpful. Thanks for diving back in. So I think that concludes our event for today. Really appreciate the interactivity. Love hearing your questions. Please take us up on filling out the middle link here for feedback and for future session ideas. I think this is a hot topic. This is just scratching the surface on what's possible. And so we'd love to hear more from you. And again, really appreciate your time today. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.